Okay, for this video, I'm going to be talking about interfaces. And an interface is sort of like a template for your classes. It's a guarantee that your class is going to use certain methods, which becomes useful a little later. So to start out an interface, instead of saying public class, we'll say public interface, and then we'll call it something human, for example. Um, and what are some things humans do? Humans, let's say public int, uh, how old? And this is an abstract method. It doesn't actually, um, have a body. The body is something you're going to implement in the class that uses the interface. It's just a guideline of what methods you're going to use and what the signatures of those methods are. Um, so public string get resume, or list resume perhaps. And then maybe another one, public void eat. So humans should all eat, and then it'll eat something, maybe some food, defined by some string. Okay, notice that's all I have for my interface. Now, how would I use this? I'm going to make a new class, and I'm going to call it test subject. And hopefully, this test subject is going to implement or use the interface human. Notice the keyword implements is in purple. Now I mouse over this and you'll notice it says the type test subject must implement the inherited abstract method human.eat. So one thing I have to do is I have to add the unimplemented methods. No matter what, they have to be in there. They don't have to do anything. They have to be in there. So I have to have how old, I have to have list resume, and I have to have string food. So for example, I might say some food that, so maybe here I'll have a private string array list of foods. And actually maybe I'll make it an array list, which is just an array that doesn't have size limitations. And I'll import JavaUtil to use that. Now I'm going to have a constructor. No, I won't have a constructor. I'll use some default constructor. And here, now I'll have a constructor. So public test subject, and the test subject will have some name. Instead of a name, they'll have a number, and list of foods is a new array list string of size 10, default size. So far we haven't really seen much. Right now, let's say how old is going to be 0. We're not going to worry about that for a test subject. Perhaps we'll say 18 for the purposes of being an adult and being able to, participate in clinical studies. Plus some random number. Times 50. And this is changed to lowercase random, and that should work fine. And notice that I have a cast on math.random to turn it into some integer. So this will be an integer age from 18 through 68. For the age, it'll be random. And it'll be random every time. So every time this person looks at the age, their age will change. And when they eat food, and I'll do this in just a moment. When they eat food, they are going to add that food to the list, which is called list of foods. We'll just add it like that. And then here we're going to say, for each string s in list of foods, so we'll have some return string. That returns that list of foods in string form. So this is just about test subjects to eat food. And all of this was not defined in my interface. I made this up on the spot based on having to implement these things. So it's a guarantee that your class will have these methods: list resume, eat foods, and how old. If I made another class called let's say interviewee, well, it might also be a human and do human things. So I mouse over at unimplemented methods. It has a, how old. And in this case, I might have something else. Private int age equals 23. Return age. List at resume. Return time person of the year 2006. And I can guarantee that anyone who could possibly be a member of the interviewee class and who was alive at the time of 2006, this should be fine for their resume. And then for food, you might say nothing. You don't eat during an interview, otherwise you show your bad manners. So I have two different things that implement this interface, and they both do very different, have very different ways that they did this. If I go through and make a test class, test file, so an interface test, I'll give it a main method, and I'll say test subject t equals new test subject, And what do I need for that? I need an integer. That integer will be 15. And that was for the subject number. Okay, fine. And then here, I will say print t.list resume. And right now that should be empty because he hasn't eaten any foods or she hasn't eaten any foods. Don't know, don't have a gender assigned to the test subject. Although we certainly could do that. T dot eat cabbage. So when the person eats cabbage, their resume gets cabbage added onto it. If they also want to eat cauliflower, probably how it's spelled. Okay. And that gets added to their resume. And that's all defined by the test subject class. Whereas if I have interviewee, well, they don't have any constructor that has any information. And then I'll say I.eat, and then system.out.println. Actually, I'm just going to change this to be I.list resume. Well, eat, string. Let's have them eat cabbage again. Let's run this. And you'll see that the resume is not attached to the cabbage. Cabbage doesn't have any effect. It still has the method, but it doesn't do anything with it. However, its resume is printed, this interviewee, and it's Time Person of the Year, 2006. Maybe I'll do, what is it again? How old? And I run this, and it says 23. Now, just as with inheritance, or with classes, I can also do some human array. Some human array with 3 objects. And this H0 will be, you know what, I'm just gonna cut that down here. I'll say H0 is equal to T, H1 is equal to I, and then H2 is equal to new human. Oh no, that doesn't work. Why? We are not allowed to instantiate, we're not allowed to make an instance out of any interface. An interface, by definition, as well as an abstract class, cannot be instantiated. They're used for structure, but you can't actually make an object out of one. So they're templates that you can't build objects out of. You can just use them to enhance classes. So here instead, maybe I'll do a new test subject. Oops. With the number 35. And now the question is, how can I use this to ensure that everything in there gets their information listed? I can still do instance of. So for instance, system, I'll print out each 0 instance of test subject, and I run that, and it will say true. H1 instance of test subject, well, that's going to be false. What if I say human here? Well, that's true. It is of type human. It implements the human. It implements the human interface, so it'll come away being true there. Now, one thing else I can do is go through this entire array, and let's see how this doesn't work. Okay. Well, it sort of works. Now, here's the thing. Let's say we do h1 dot, what can humans do again? Humans can list their resume, or let's say system.out.println h1.howOld. Well, we know all humans have the howOld method, even if they're not actual, even if they're, a test subject, if they're an interviewee, it doesn't really matter. They have the howOld method, so I can call it, and I know I'll get a result. My first human is 43, second is 23, third is 41. Same thing will go through. So I would recommend playing around with this, seeing what produces results, what doesn't, but this is slightly different because I'm guaranteed that if I'm using one of these three methods, I will be able to call it on H1. Now, the next thing is, well, what if I say public int print 3? And I say return 3. Okay, so instead here I'll say print 3, and I run this, and it won't even print, well, in this case that was an interviewee, right? Yeah, so let's say it won't even print the first thing because print 3 is not part of human, and so we're not allowed to use it with human. And again, I could say, okay, well, maybe I can cast it to an interviewee. And see if that works. And it will work for that one, but again, it won't work for the others. So using instance of is still important here. Okay, so be careful with your methods. This can make many things easier. If I have a bunch of students of different types, say junior, sophomore, senior, and freshman, they can all be of type, they can all extend high school student, or they can all implement the interface high school student. Because high school student isn't necessarily going to be useful beyond providing a structure. They all have classes, they all have grades, they all have age, they all have, hopefully a lunch period, though it depends on how busy your schedule is. And so that's guaranteed to be there. Those are things that would be, a high school student might be the interface, and then you can get classes that implement that interface, say freshman, junior, sophomore, and senior. Okay, that's it for this video. It's a lot to digest, so good luck.